Hello and welcome back to another edition of Seminole Sidelines, the Osceola's Florida State Spring Football Preview for 2024, as we are affectionately calling the Irish Spring for Florida State football. It's coming off St. Patrick's Day to start spring football, and then, of course, heading to Ireland to start the season. But, guys, today we're going to preview the defensive backs. This is another position group that, just like most of the positions that all the positions on defense, really, you have some questions about with the departures of Renardo Green, Jarrian Jones, Akeem Dent. But this group, to me, top to bottom, has the potential to be the most talented and deepest on Florida State's defense in 2024. And it could be much like the defensive front was this year, the strength of the defense in 2024. And just get your thoughts, guys, overall thoughts on the group. And Curt, we'll start with you since you wrote the Osceola preview on the defensive backs.
Yeah, ran up right when this video went live. Yeah, I think the nice thing is, you're right. You lose an outside corner, or you lose your starting nickel in Jarrian. You lose a starting safety in Akeem Dent. But you also have returning guys who've each played a good amount of football at each of those spots. Greedy Vance has played a lot of nickel. Ventrell Cypress, I thought, grew as the season progressed last year after transferring in from Virginia and has also played a lot of football. And Shyheim Brown is a homegrown safety who's played a lot of football for you and has now become, I think, one of the more experienced guys on the defense. You have kind of, I think, questions about the rotation at each of those spots, even if you have one guy you like at each of them, but you have options. And I think you have some really upside potential guys who I think could take advantage of the opportunity and really break out in 2024. So, I think, it's hard to quibble too much with much of anything from Pat Surtain's first season leading the group. And now he's got a different challenge, replacing some guys who played a whole lot of college football. Because I think those three guys we talked about played like over 150 games at Florida State over the last 5 seasons between them.
Yeah, those three kids played a ton of football for Florida State. And listen, you're right. We saw Jarrian Jones have his best year as a Seminole under Pat Surtain, so you got to give Surtain a lot of credit for that. And obviously Jarrian too. He really matured the longer he was here. But Bob, get your thoughts on the group before we dig into each position.
I think it's essential to have depth and experience coming back because you play the 4-2-5 a lot. That's kind of your base defense. I mean, I don't know what percentage of the snaps Florida State was in the nickel, but it feels like predominantly based on, down and distance and what the offense is putting out there from a personnel standpoint. There is some, I think, personnel flexibility there too. A lot of cross training where we could see guys at different position groups. But again, happy to see so many returning pieces despite the losses. It feels like there's a lot of talent. There's a lot of 4-star type of talent there for the coaches to continue to develop and improve. And yeah, we'll get into the names, but I think the names could shuffle on the depth chart pretty much throughout the spring and coming out of the spring.
You could have easily seen attrition through the portal of some guys leaving, maybe wanting an opportunity elsewhere. I like going through and doing the portal. It did strike me that the only 3 guys they're losing are those 3 seniors. That as of now, and it could change post-spring, but as of now, everybody is still here. Everybody wants that chance to compete for a spot.
Yeah. I listen. I think that may, I don't want to read too much into it, but I think that may also read into the way they feel about their position coach when you don't leave, and their head coach. I mean, it all comes into effect. But I do think that speaks highly of Pat Surtain. And listen, Adams, works with the safeties in individual drills and things like that. So I think you got to give him credit for that. Listen, I think we're all excited to see what this group of very athletic, fast guys can do. It's got a chance to be, listen, as we'll start breaking them down by the position group. But I think you look at just about every kid at every position, and you're excited about what they've done and what they could build on. And I think you're excited about the potential of some of the guys that are either going into the redshirt freshman year or that we see coming in for spring out of high school. So, but let's start where probably the biggest question is. And again, this is our projected depth chart. This may change as we go through the spring practice period. And of course, after spring, we will come back with a more updated version of our Osceola depth chart as we get a chance to evaluate these kids ourselves. And listen, they're going to rotate kids around the secondary like they always do. We hear that every spring from Adam Fuller and Mike Norvell. But probably the biggest question is out at the field corner. If you're unfamiliar with what field corner means, that's the corner out that plays to the wide side of the field. And I think this is probably where the biggest question is based on our depth chart. Kirk, you got Azariah Thomas right there is Azariah Thomas as your first team field corner as a redshirt freshman, and then you got Jabril Rawls behind him. I'm sorry, Azariah's a junior. Jabril's a freshman redshirt, and then you got we projected Howard and Bates behind them. But I do think that we're going to find out whether AZ can carry the load.
I think he is probably of this group the guy I have most poised to be a breakout guy. I think we really from his first practices, when he enrolled ahead of the 2022 season, we were all impressed with the playmaking ability, especially like in 7-on. And I remember DB's coach at the time, Marcus Woodson, kind of was pumping the brakes a bit and saying like, I want to see him put the pads on. And I think it did take a little time for him to get used to the physicality at this level. But I thought he took, as a rotational DB, he played rotationally both as a true freshman and last year as a sophomore. It was kind of their third outside corner last year. I thought he made really big strides. He was behind only Renardo in terms of pass breakups. He had 10 DBUs. I thought he played the position really well. I thought he even grew as the season progressed. And I think the field corner, I think, suits him well just because of how well he moves. He is a space guy where, I think Fentrell was in the field last year and they had Renardo at boundary. I think it's possible they move Fentrell to boundary and have Azariah cover the field because I think that plays to his lanky frame and the skill set, how well he moves.
Yeah, I agree with you. I do think that AZ's got the ability to cover more ground than Fentrell. He's a longer kid, really fast. So I agree with you there. Bob, your take on the field corner spots? Or spots?
I think AZ is clearly the front runner in my view. I do want to see a Jamari Howard, a Kai Bates. How much can they push? What is that learning curve early for a freshman? I think it's worth just reminding, like, AZ was sort of that last minute guy that jumped in on that recruiting class, right? And there was a lot of, oh my God, what happened about the number one prospect that got away, that went to another school? But Florida State got AZ at the last minute too. And that's been a consistent guy that I think the Seminoles could really lean on in the secondary. This could be his, like Curt's saying, could be his breakout year for Florida State.
Yeah, and then of course, listen, we'll mention Jabril Rawls, and we were all impressed with him in practice. He made some nice plays. I remember particularly a couple times down in red zone passing situations. He made a couple of nice picks in the end zone, and I know you guys obviously watched more of the skill guys in practice than I do, but I think AZ will lock that position down if that's the way this group ends up. But I do think Jabril Rawls has a chance to be a really good player and contribute next year. And then, listen, I've been fired up about seeing Jamari Howard since I saw him in the state championship games. He's a long athlete. He can really run. He's got great ball skills. So I'm fired up about seeing him. And then, of course, listen, Kai Bates kind of gets left out because of all the bigger names, I guess, they signed with this freshman class, particularly Charles Lester, who got most of the headlines, and then obviously Jamari was probably right behind him. But I think that is probably I think the biggest question is is AZ ready to carry the full load? But you're right, he had an outstanding year last year, 29 tackles, 10 pass breakups, as you said. So that's going to be a fun position to watch. And then, of course, I think as we move to boundary corner, I think everybody came in last year thinking that we were going to see basically a lockdown corner, an all AC performer in Fentrell Cypress. I'm not sure that's what we got. Obviously it's hard to be overly critical when you play on a defense that was as dominant as Florida State was last year. You're kind of parting hairs at this point. But just talk a little bit, Curt, about why you think Fentrell, you've already mentioned you think they'll move Fentrell to the boundary. And if you're not familiar with what boundary corner is, just what you think. It's the receiver to the short side of the field. But Curt, just talk a little bit about Fentrell and what your expectations are for him this spring and fall.
Yeah, I think Fentrell the Boston College game was a day to forget. That was about the one day to forget in the regular season for most of the Florida State team. I think Fentrell was on that list. I think he got picked on some by slants and it was just not his best day. But on the whole, I don't think he had. I think that kind of lingered and left what people thought of him the rest of the year, when I thought he played a good bit better the rest of the way. I do think he's a more natural boundary fit because I don't think he's the cleanest, but I just think he's a better mover than him. But Florida State had such a natural boundary corner with Renardo last year that Fentrell didn't get to play it and was kind of pushed to field because he was one of the better options to start. But I think he played, definitely got more comfortable as the season progressed. And I think, with another year in his system, I think he's a guy who now it feels like back for year 2 here with a year under his belt, understanding of the playbook going into spring, is a guy who maybe could re-realize that, because he was an all-ACC corner at Virginia before transferring. I think he could re-realize that this fall.
Yep, Bob?
Again, love my year 2 transfers. So I think Fentrell will be more comfortable. He showed at Virginia he was really a willing run stopper. And I think, do we see more of that this year? Do we see a guy who's just very comfortable in the scheme as far as not just coverage, but stopping the run? So there's a lot of good players, again, in this entire group. We like Quindarius Jones quite a bit. I saw Charles Lester in the state championship game. Be honest, that particular night, he wasn't challenged all that much on the field. So there wasn't a ton for me to take away from him on defense. Had a heck of an arm and threw downfield on one play on offense. But I am very curious to see what Charles Lester can bring, and can he challenge for some playing time, potentially on defense, or maybe even as a return type of guy.
He looked the tour of duty, that's for sure.
Yeah. And listen, Quindarius Jones is one of my favorite, out of his class that he signed with. He was my favorite player. He could play so many positions. I think if they put 15 to 20 pounds on him, moving outside linebacker, he'd be a great fit there. I think he'd be a great safety. I think he'd make a great receiver. I think this is one of the most athletic guys on Florida State's roster. I think that he will certainly, listen, I think it's easy to sit here and reject him as Fentrell's backup if that's the way it shakes out at boundary corner. Because, listen, Charles Lester's, he'll have a chance because it's, the further away you are from the ball, the easier it is to play as a true freshman. He is very talented. But, listen, Quindarius Jones is as athletic as anybody on Florida State's roster. And I think it's going to be interesting to see, if he can push Fentrell, number one. If he doesn't, and there seems to be no clear-cut winner at some other positions, do they move Quindarius? But he's a guy that I am looking forward to see as he goes into his sophomore year, where he ends up and how he ends up playing, because I do think he is I'm not going to say freakish athlete, but he's a great athlete. There's no doubt. He's got great size, great range, runs extremely well. All right, so I think I think another position we think that's probably nailed down from a starting perspective, and the battle is more about who's going to be the backup. But you got Greedy Vance coming back for his redshirt senior year. Greedy's a guy that has continued to get better. I think we would all say that he had his best year at Florida State this past season. But he will battle Earl Little Jr. and Kevin Knowles is who we have as the backups right now there at nickel corner. But Curt, just talk a little bit about that position group.
Yeah, I think Greedy's been, I think, pretty reliable for you the last 2 years. I know hasn't started because Kevin Knowles, Kevin Knowles held the role 2 years ago, and last year Jarrian Jones emerged as kind of their best nickel, but he's just been a reliable guy. I do think there's a world, though, I will say, where Earl Little is another guy who beats Greedy out for the starting job. I think if he stays healthy, I think he battled injuries throughout his time at Alabama. But, he's 2 years removed from being a top 100 recruit in the 2022 class. We know the NFL pedigree. He's a little bigger than Greedy. I think he's got a couple inches on him to maybe bring a little more size at that nickel spot, which can always help when you're going against slot guys. And I thought he moved. Game. Yep. I thought he moved well seeing him in tour of duty. So I think it's about, how well can he take to the defense? Can he stay healthy? Because that was, he missed the end of the Bama season. I think he played in 8 games and didn't really play down the stretch because he was dealing with an injury. But I think, the traits are all there where I could see him pushing for major playing time, if not the starting role, if things go right. But it is nice for Florida State to have someone who they know they can rely on in Greedy.
Well, and then you got Knowles behind those two. And listen, Kevin probably, if we're being honest, probably had his most disappointing season last year. We're just being completely upfront and not trying to Listen, he's a great kid, works hard. He's been somebody that's been around this program a long time, and you got to hope that he has a bounce back season, bounce back spring because of who they brought in and the ability that Greedy and Earl do have. And that's just if that position stays the way it is, if it's just those three guys. So but yeah, so it's great that they're in a position now where you can actually put a guy at third team that's got as much experience as Kevin does. So I think that speaks to the strength or the potential strength of this room.
And the safety experience was not a great one for Kevin Knowles. They were trying something new because they felt good about their nickel depth last year, and it didn't really work out for him moving him to safety. But I mean, nickel's where he's had more success. I mean, remember his freshman year where he was pretty immediately impactful as a true freshman playing nickel. So he has had more success doing that. There's a world where he could rediscover something there for sure after taking a step back.
Yeah, and listen, I'll make the argument. I can make this argument on both sides of the ball. I think sometimes when you start rotating players around the secondary, around the offensive line, it stunts their growth at the other position, particularly when you now moving from corner to corner. That's not as big a deal as moving from corner to safety. Either one that's safe, it's totally different positions, totally different responsibilities. You can make the argument that they're dissimilar, where the corner positions are very similar. So I know they talk a lot about rotation, but I hope that Florida State can get to the point from a personnel standpoint where we know who's going to be there. That they, not us, but they know who the free safeties are, and they have to do less experimenting as their depth chart becomes more solidified. And I think this is the first time since Mike's been here that maybe the secondary has a chance to do that. But all right, so that was my little soapbox. I'll move on to the next position group, and we'll go to free safety. Where I think this is I think we know who's going to start at free safety, or buck safety as they call it. But I do think that I think it's Shaheem Zaluz, and we've talked about potentially one of these guys just because of what's that linebacker moving. You guys do not think they'll move either one of them. I think there's a possibility. As I see the depth chart, I'm starting to question my own opinion on that, depending on what happens some other places. But listen, I think Shaheem was either the third or fourth leading tackle on the football team last year, if I'm not mistaken. I believe the leader had 70. He had 53, 4 pass breakups, and obviously didn't he do some things on special teams again this past year? Did he have a block something or another?
I think he did in practice. I'm not sure he did in the game. I think he might have had a blocked field goal again or a blocked extra point in practice.
I could have. Yeah, that's probably what.
But he does everything.
Listen, if they get the kid from Cornell, he's going to be out of a field goal kicking block job because that kid's got more block kicks than anybody in Ivy League history. But anyway, we're here to talk about DBs. So go ahead and talk about Shaheem as a safety, and obviously a guy who is now as a redshirt junior taking on a much bigger leadership role in this defense than he has in the past.
Yeah, I think Shaheem can be that kind of captain on the back end, right? Just making sure to clean up plays that could get a little bit dirty. I think Curt, you mentioned it in your story, a little bit of a Jamie Robinson type, or the closest to a Jamie Robinson that Florida State has on the roster. I like Shaheem. I think he's obviously got a lot of room where he can still grow. We've talked about how he might be a linebacker type if needed. We'll see if that truly is something that's needed down the road. But I like him as the communicator, the guy who makes sure everybody's aligned in the right spot, just make sure that things are set pre-snap. And that was kind of an Akeem Dent type of responsibility at times last year. So I think Shaheem takes on that expanded role going into the fall.
Yeah. Curt?
Yeah, I mean, he can just do so many different things. I mean, you can move him around. He can blitz well. He's an effective run stopper. He's good in coverage. I think tackling was, an area, if you look at the PFF grades, that didn't grade out the most favorably. Maybe that's an area of improvement. I mean, that's important as kind of the often last line of defense that a safety can be. So, but yeah, I think he I don't want to compare him. I mean, in ability right now to Jamie Robinson, because I think I need to see a little more, but he definitely has that potential to be that type of versatile guy. And I'm fascinated. We can look to the other guy too. I think Ashlyn Barker. And we don't know for sure how the depth at safety settles. I think that's somewhat up in the air. But I think he was someone, it felt like the late addition last offseason, or they were maybe hoping could break into the rotation a little more. And I think he ended up being their fourth safety, but he was behind Conrad. Conrad kind of beat him out for more reps. And I'm interested what another year at this level. I mean, getting thrown from JUCO into here can be a challenge. So what a year under his belt can do for a guy like Ashland Barker, because I remember being impressed from the first time I saw him size-wise of how big he is, height-wise. And I have to imagine, I don't know a weight comparison offhand, but he's hit that weight room pretty hard in the last year and shaped his body a little bit.
Yeah, I think he's about I think they listed him at 206. I think he came in around 190, if I'm not mistaken. And listen, he's a kid that obviously has only been in the program a year. I think we will see him take another step in his development. And listen, if Shaheem Brown can get to Jamie's Robinson's level, Florida State's going to be well served in the secondary, because that was a ball playing Jesse, Jamie Robinson. So he was one of the more favorite guys over the last 4 or 5 years that's played at Florida State, in my estimation. One of the better football players, straight out football player. You can take away all the measurables, all those things. He was just a really, really good football player. Now now this would probably be the Jerry and Pat fan club position, because Jerry Cutts, our publisher, loves Conrad Hussey. And if we were doing hot takes on this, my hot take was KJ Kirkland's going to find a way to start on this defense next year. But as I told Curt before we started taping, that's off a very small sample size. He did go through that deal with some injuries. But when we saw him last spring, guys, we could not believe that he was a true freshman in spring practice. And then they brought in Devontae Brown to compete at that position. But listen, I think if this is the way the depth chart works at this position, then this has a chance to be a very deep group at strong safety.
Yeah, I think we liked Conrad Hussey, and he made some of the biggest plays up at Pitt in a game where Florida State seemed like they were on the ropes that entire first 3 quarters almost before they put away Pitt. But I mean, to make that hustle play down the goal line, I think he had the interception or the fumble later on in that game, another takeaway there that was pretty big for Conrad. So I think we've seen enough glimpses of what he can do, not the biggest amount of sample size and snaps, but a guy that we can project as somebody who can be impactful, across more snaps this fall.
Curt, any additional comments on the strong safety spot?
Yeah, I mean, I think Conrad, the playmaking ability was undeniable. I think him maybe more than anyone else here. I'm fascinated to see what the step is from year 1 to year 2, because I think we're high on a lot of those freshmen they brought in last year. But I think Conrad played the most snaps of any true freshman. I mean, it was only about 300 or so. It wasn't like a ton, but it was a noticeable amount, and he, I think, made the most of that. Remember the hit against Virginia Tech, and like Bob said, the turnovers. I think a big area for him that was something Akeem Dent I thought did well, and that he'll have to do similarly, is the run defense. Is being the guy at the back of the end there, not overcommitting to the wrong gap type thing when he's coming up to help stop runs and things like that, because that's I think was a bit of an issue when he played some last year. Yeah, KJ, I really wish KJ Kirkland had gotten kind of a fully healthy year in practice. I mean, heck, I think he might have been there for fourth safety last year, more over Ashland Barker, if he'd been healthy for the entire year, but he did miss some time. And I'm interested. I mean, Devontae Brown, I'm not sure he's ever played safety. He, I know, didn't have a lot of success last year as a corner at Miami. He didn't play a ton, really. I think his brother played more than him, but he had, I know, an all AAC level season when he was a cornerback at UCF, and considered Florida State last offseason before going to Miami, and now trying him out at a new position. And I think he brings experience, maybe not at safety, but I think even his experience at the collegiate level, as the senior who's played a lot of ball, could help if he takes to the position well.
Yeah, and this is the one position group where I think I can safely say they will not add anybody through the portal. So I don't think we have to worry about the spring portal at any one of these 5 spots. I hope not, anyway. But anyway, listen, it's going to be spring is always fascinating. We have now talked about all 8 position groups as we've moved through the entire roster. We are less than 4 days away from the start of spring practice. It'll be Tuesday, March 19th. We are on March 15th today as we speak to you. So listen, we're 4 days away from the start of spring ball. The start of the to me, the realistic start of the 2024 football season as Florida State begins to prepare for its next football season, fifth football season under Mike Norvell and staff. And listen, I think it's going to be interesting to see how we come back and look at this depth chart, our projected depth chart around April 24th or whenever we sit down and reevaluate what we saw through April 20th of this year. But guys, I appreciate y'all joining me. Appreciate y'all sharing your thoughts with our subscribers and viewers, and look forward to now providing daily practice reports for our subscribers and viewers. And we will be at every practice in March and April. So you will get I think, are you guys going to be doing live threads from practice like we do in the fall?
I mean, we'll do threads after the fact. They don't like us doing live. Like, they don't like us putting
so they're post practice.
But it'll come after. And we haven't talked about it, but I think it's quite possible we come back here and do a video talking about the first day of practice. What is that, Tuesday night?
Yeah, and then you guys will have a visit with all the coaches on Monday. So we'll have a lot of content as Jerry, Bob, Curt, and Nick have lunch with Mike Norvell and his staff and get a chance to pick their brains the eve before spring practice. And then, of course, we'll have more baseball and softball coverage this week at the Osceola.com. If you're not a subscriber, please go to the Osceola.com and check us out. We've got daily recruiting information out there. It's been a very busy week, even though Florida State players are off campus. It has not slowed down recruiting. They offered a tight end from Pennsylvania 2 days ago. We've seen a lot of kids start to dwindle down the number of schools they're considering, including Carday Smith. And we've even got some 2026 prospects that are national guys that are going to be on campus in March and April. So please check that out and subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're sitting here watching us on YouTube, hit the alert button so you get alerts to when we are going to have a new podcast / video cast come out. And also you'll want to check out Bob, Curt, and Nick's podcast on the baseball team. It was off to a 15-0 start at the time of this taping. I think it's safe to say they will still be 15-0 when this comes out because they don't play before 12 noon on Friday. So, all right, guys, thanks for joining us. And Curt, Bob, any final thoughts as we get ready to head to the start of spring practice 2024?
Hey, I'm ready to turn talking season to watching season. I'm ready.
Yep.
Fair enough. All right, guys.
Your Seminoles kick off the 2024 football season in Dublin, Ireland, as they face the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in the Aer Lingus College Football Classic. Join fellow Florida State fans on a trip you won't soon forget. Game tickets for the August 24th matchup are now available through Florida State Athletics Ticket Office and selling fast. Visit Seminoles2Ireland.com. That's Seminoles, the number 2, Ireland.com. And go Noles!